I think it's important to understand that, as Bill Browder said, is that these dictators are extremely reunited, and their only desire not only to actually repress their own people, but also to actually expand. And what we mean by expansion is that expand to Europe, expand to UK, and to invade as much as country as possible. Today it's Ukraine. Who knows who's going to be next tomorrow?
She's doing a very good job. She succeeded in getting her father into house arrest. He desperately needs medical attention. We're going to do everything we can to help her and her family raise the profile of her dad so that hopefully he can be released. And I have to believe that Azerbaijan is not a monolith like Russia.
Hello, you're watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. And today we are meeting the human rights lawyer Zhala Bayramova, daughter of the renowned Azerbaijani politician and economist Dr. Gubad Ibadoglu. This is part of our special series featuring some of the winners of the 10th Magnitsky Human Rights Awards. And Bill Browder, the founder of those awards, joins us also. Welcome to both of you. And first of all, huge congratulations for your award. You have won Outstanding Young Activist. It's a large part of this is what you have been doing and your human rights work on behalf of your father and others in Azerbaijan. And obviously, Azerbaijan is right in the news today because it is hosting the COP29 UN World Climate Conference and putting Azerbaijan in a very good light. What is the reality of life in Azerbaijan, both the politics and for the people?
Thank you a lot for your congratulating me as well, and for this wonderful question. To describe the life in Azerbaijan, I think what I would actually describe how my dad was detained with my mom when my dad was coming from London to see my grandma, and my dad and my mom was in the same car in Azerbaijan. So what happened is that to detain them, the 6 police cars crashed their cars in between, and the 20 men in black physically assaulted them. And both police cars and basically men, they didn't have any police symbol on them. So they were like basically in a black clothes, in a black cars. So the way that my mom has seen it is like, it's like a mafia who is trying to like doing sex trafficking or like the organ mafia. So she was extremely terrified, and they were both physically assaulted and detained as a result. But that kind of shows what society goes through in Azerbaijan, in a way that people get detained, assaulted when they are imprisoned, but also the people who try to voice any kind of criticism at all, they also face the same realities.
And your father was basically detained. He was based in the UK, in London. He was working at the London School of Economics as an academic there. He goes back to visit his mother in Azerbaijan, and this is where this happens. First of all, what kind of man is your father, and why was he detained?
So my dad is actually my best friend since my childhood. Even like in the university, like if there was any kind of text, like in kind of foreign language classes, that who's your hero, who's like this political leader that you really aspire to, I will always talk about my dad. And I think that it's very important to say that Azerbaijan is an extremely conservative country, in a way that even like plugging your eyebrows is kind of forbidden if you're not married for women, as a tradition. But my dad has been extremely supportive of like about my relationships. We will talk like every single day, and we will discuss things like usually like girl to girl you will discuss, but I was able to very freely discuss everything with him, and like he is my best friend, and he has always been my best friend. And I think this is a relationship that is quite uncommon, definitely in Azerbaijan, but sometimes also like in a lot of Western countries. And the primary reason that my dad was detained is because of his work in London. So as a LAC professor, he was not only teaching about money laundering and corruption to students in London, but also he was investigating them, because as you would know, Azerbaijani elites, oligarchs, they will bring a lot of money to UK, to London. And the main reason for them is not that they want to buy like 5 houses or 5 cars, but they want to corrupt like UK politicians, officials, and journalists. And there's a lot of investigations that they actually have the same channels to corrupt officials as Russia. So they're not doing it alone, but they're doing it with Russia. They're also letting and helping Russian government to infiltrate to the UK politics, basically. What my dad did not only like investigated those kind of corruptions, but he also opened the foundation, which is like Azerbaijan Youth Foundation in UK. And what he wanted to do is to recover the stolen assets and give a chance to Azerbaijani students to be able to study in UK and use that money to pay their tuition fees in UK. But it's kind of a win-win situation because Azerbaijani students will come to UK and learn about UK values and the human rights and democracy and can actually become UK's allies in Azerbaijan. But also, it will also bring the money back to the UK universities and actually help the economy in UK. So what Azerbaijani government was afraid of is that with this plan, my dad will be able to actually help students and the young people in Azerbaijan to learn UK values. So that's what they were scared of.
So what are the charges against your father?
So the charges against my dad is counterfeit money. So according to the government, he has $40,000 in his office, which he had the office previously, so he wasn't actually using that place. But also at the same time, the extremism. So what they are faulting him is to actually do a rebellion. I guess the idea of getting young people learn about UK values is basically like rebellion for them because they know that if that happens, then Azerbaijan can actually become a place like UK, have a free and fair elections.
So he was basically being accused of perhaps preparing to incite unrest in Azerbaijan. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. But what he was trying to do is to educate students from Azerbaijan.
Bill, how did you meet?
So I've spent the last many years working on human rights cases, and in the last 2.5 years working on the case of Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was falsely imprisoned in Russia and sentenced 25 years. And I was invited to an event for political prisoners in Berlin at the Axel Springer Foundation, and it was at the German Parliament, and it was an event for Vladimir Kara-Murza, who's a very high-profile political prisoner. Jimmy Lai, who is a British citizen sitting in Hong Kong prison, his son was there, and a few other, I would say, notorious political prisoners. And we all went through our presentations, and as I was finishing up, this young lady sitting a few seats away from me came up to me with her brochure and her story, and I think that there's this I don't know joke about it, but there's this idea of an elevator pitch, and she gave me her elevator pitch on her dad. That had her dad was an LSE professor, that he was focusing on money laundering and corruption, that he criticized the Azerbaijani regime, and then he was beaten, imprisoned, and tortured in prison. And when I heard the story, and the way that her manner and the way she went about it was just so compelling that I felt both that I had to do something to help her and her father and their family, and also to make sure that what she's doing breaks through the clutter of news, so that people know about this story, because it's something shocking, and it's particularly shocking when here in the UK the people that are torturing her father own vast amounts of real estate and luxury accommodations, and everyone seems to welcome them while her father is being tortured in prison for uncovering corruption. And I feel very strongly in favor of her cause. I nominated her for the Magnitsky Award, and when the committee heard her story, it was a unanimous decision. And I'm very glad that Times Radio is giving us some of your precious time for Zhala to tell her story, because it really is, and I hope we'll get into the details, it really is something that anyone who hears this story will want to do something.
And Zhala, how is your father now? I know he's under house arrest, so he's not actually in prison per se, but how is he coping?
So my dad, he was kept 9 months in isolation center. While he was kept there, because he was physically assaulted, he had injuries in his back, but also he was kept without drinkable water, proper food and medication. My dad had heart surgery before, so we have been quite worried about his health. And because he was kept under those conditions with like white bright light all the time, his inmates was trying to like provocate him, and they were making a lot of noise, so he couldn't even sleep. So he was in a very stressful condition. He was not even allowed outside of his cell room, which is like a violation of like a Geneva Convention that is like such a basic things that almost all the world countries has been signed up to this. After 9 months, we were able to get him to transfer to house arrest. But even though in house arrest, his conditions are still bad.
Let me just interrupt. It was only after her intervention and her campaign and her brother's campaign. It wasn't just like they transferred him out of prison into house arrest.
Zhala made it happen.
She made a world scandal out of the
It's
fact.
the European Parliament, wasn't it? Was that right? How did you bring that about?
So basically, same week that he was released, we managed to get European Parliament resolution, Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly declaration. We got a sanction bill to the U.S. Congress, and we already had a basically resolution in U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate, because my dad, before teaching at LAC, was teaching at the Rutgers University based in New Jersey, basically. So we got almost like a lot of parliaments, especially powerful parliaments in the world. We managed to get them to talk about my dad and actually decide resolutions. Just this October, European Parliament adopted a third resolution that calls for my dad's release from house arrest, but also addresses my mom's health condition, which because she now lost 30% of her nerve function on the right side of her brain. She has a hard time to balance also because of the physical assault that she received during detention. But we're going to have fourth resolution about COP29, which will also talk about my father's case and which will happen this week in European Parliament. So like my dad is dying right now. His aorta is expanding, which means that his heart vein is expanding, can explode anytime. Like we don't have a choice but shake all the world to save my father's life, because I don't care what happens after my dad's death. Like I don't care if they give him like awards, if they try to like honor his name.
The pressure is on right now.
It doesn't matter. If LAC professor's life, my dad's life cannot be saved, like, that's the main and most important thing for us. We want to be reunited with him.
Bill, you're looking like you want to say something.
Well, it's one of these situations where, he's being slowly tortured to death. They're denying him. So he's sitting in Azerbaijan. He's no longer in the prison. He's in house arrest, but they're completely denying him medical attention. And they're hoping that the pressure's off because he's out of the physical prison in house arrest. But if they deny a man medical attention whose aorta is about to explode, that's just as terrible a thing. And it really is a matter of urgency. And this is the moment when people can pay attention to this. The Azerbaijani government is, showcasing themselves as some kind of modern country hosting the COP conference. And in the middle, while everybody is, going around to fancy conference centers and shiny hotels, there's a man who they're basically slowly torturing to death, an LSE professor from London, who all his family wants is just so he can go and get medical treatment so he doesn't die. And I think that anyone who goes there for this COP conference should have her father's name on their lips.
And you have pressured the Foreign Secretary here in the UK, who has gone to COP29 to do something for you. What do you want him to do?
I want him to rescue my dad. I want him to kidnap my father from Azerbaijan and
in the nicest possible ways.
Yes. But also I also want him to address human rights situation in Azerbaijan. My dad's case is not an exception. There's more than 300 political prisoners. I mean, this year Azerbaijan ranked like 0 on political rights of Freedom House Human Rights and Democracy Index, and basically like the other countries that ranked 0 is on political rights are like North Korea, Turkmenistan, this kind of countries that are extremely worse on the ranking as well. Political prisoners, civil society members, we are allies of West. We have been promoting values of UK, human rights and democracy in Azerbaijan. We have been receiving, for example, grants, for example, from UK. We have been trying to promote this kind of idea. So we are allies of UK and really need UK to actually address human rights situation in Azerbaijan.
I just want to ask you about the law that is similar to Russia's foreign agents law on independent NGOs that was used in Azerbaijan to attempt to criminalize your father. Can you explain a bit more about that law?
Yes. So basically, back in 2013-15, the President Aliyev, he gave an interview to Euronews saying that he will cut all the fundings to civil society members. And that's what he did. He adopted a law, and which means that none of the independent NGO registrations were allowed. All the NGOs that were independent, their registrations were revoked, but also any kind of money that you receive from abroad or also inside the country as well, you have to get a permission for that. So if you do not get a permission for that, that means you're tax evading, you're money laundering. And what government did is basically open the criminal investigation against all the independent NGOs and said that, okay, you have this grants from, let's say, UK government or German government or like European Parliament. Now, because of this, we're going to punish you for your work on human rights and democracy, basically. And they started to detain people. And one of the target of this was my father and his NGO, Economic Research Center, which they opened the criminal investigation against it. But now that we have a decision from European Court of Human Rights, which is like the UK is also part of, that decided that it's a violation to have this kind of criminal investigation against my father's NGO.
And how is that law being used to consolidate power in Azerbaijan?
So basically, this law is used against all the independent NGOs. Now that we don't have any independent NGO in Azerbaijan that are functioning openly. So none, like basically zero. That means that whoever receives any kind of funding to do any kind of job related human rights, democracy, journalism, everybody is literally, according to this illegal law, is violating the law because they can't register the funds that they're receiving to fund, for example, independent journalism, to fund investigation that my father has been doing in Azerbaijan. So right now that in prison, Abdus media journalists, my father, Toplum TV journalists, like everybody who are in prison is prison because of that law. So that law set alone just destroys whole civil society altogether.
Bill, we've seen foreign agents laws used in Russia and copied by nations like Georgia right now. How much of a threat is the spread of these kind of laws to journalists and activists?
Well, basically, you've got two big blocks in the world. You have the authoritarian dictators on one side, and then you have the democracies and freedom people on the other side. And this is the sort of standard playbook of the Putin-type authoritarian dictators. They started this foreign agent law in Russia a number of years ago, and they've used it to pursue just the same, just about everybody. There's no independent Western organizations or any type of organization that's critical of the government in Russia. And then they've started to export this is their technology. They've exported it to Georgia, to Azerbaijan, to many other former Soviet states. And it's a great way for a dictator to say, anybody who's critical of me must be a foreign agent, and therefore they're going to be shut down and put in jail. And that's just the and it's kind of a play on what was a reasonable thing that the United States does. The United States has a thing called the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which is something which they put in place so that you have to disclose if you're working for a foreign government, but they're not arresting anybody who's working for a foreign government, but you should know. They've taken that and said, okay, we're going to arrest anyone who's in any way connected to any foreigners of any sort, or even people who are not connected to foreigners.
I was just interested in what Zhala was saying before about what her father was doing in the UK was being able to get money that had been confiscated from Azerbaijani oligarchs to help fund student programs for people to learn and be educated, which has been used by the Azerbaijani regime to say, actually, you're trying to incite some kind of overthrow of our power here. I mean, is there a way that that mechanism can be used perhaps to help people in Ukraine right now in terms of confiscating funds? That I know that you're a big fan of getting your hands on confiscated Russian assets, but is there a mechanism there that you can see an opportunity?
Absolutely. I mean, basically, it's once the precedent has been set that a Russian or Azerbaijani criminal oligarch has money that's been frozen. And that, by the way, lots of money has been frozen. Not of Azerbaijani, it's only a very small amount of Azerbaijani, but an enormous amount of money has been frozen of Russian oligarchs here. If that money could ever be used for victims of the war in Ukraine, that would be a huge thing. Right now, all the conversations are around confiscating the Russian government money, but not the private oligarch money. If we could make that step, it would be a very strong step in the right direction.
I suppose the optimistic part for you is that you have actually managed to get your dad under house arrest, and that is the hard work that you put in there. You said, I mean, we're talking on Monday, the COP29 conference is underway now, and you're hoping for some kind of movement by the end of the conference. What are you wanting? What are you hoping for? And what indication have you got that it might actually happen? I'm hoping that by the time this goes out, this will be out of date and you'll have some good news. But can you tell me what your hope is?
Yes. Well, I don't really have indication, which is a sad part, but I have a lot of hopes to also continue this work as well. What my hope is to get released of all political prisoners in Azerbaijan, but also my father as well, so that because my dad needs an urgent surgery because of his heart. It's something that we are trying to manage with medication by creating anemia, it's just damaging all over his organs and it's still not helping with his condition. So the main thing that our hope is to get my dad out, but also to get other political prisoners out. COP29 is happening, but there's nobody from independent civil society in Azerbaijan. People are fighting for climate, people are fighting for environment from other countries, but we are not part of this fight because we are behind the bars, or people like me are in exile who cannot even go back to Azerbaijan. We want to change this reality. We want to also fight for climate and environment together with UK civil society, together with a lot of Western countries' civil society. But for that, Azerbaijan civil society must be free. And that, for example, my dad is one of the oil and gas critic of Azerbaijan. He's has been criticizing oil and gas industry and its environmental effect almost 30 years now, and he cannot go and be part of this conference. The only person in Azerbaijan who has been doing that is not part of this conference. Then that means there's no discussion of environment and climate of Azerbaijan, no discussion of oil and gas industry and its environmental effect of Azerbaijan whatsoever. And then that means that Azerbaijan's only participation in this conference is actually having more than oil and gas deals to be signed. As you know, recently Global Witness made an investigation on that, and they showed the undercover video of COP presidency and how they were trying to use COP29 to have more oil and gas basically contracts to be signed. My hope is to change this reality, to free my dad, to free political prisoners, but also change the reality of Azerbaijan so that we can fight environment and climate like this, with other countries.
And Bill, you talked earlier about how you first met Zhala, and you've been in exactly the same situation as she has been, in someone close to you being incarcerated, fighting for their freedom and their rights. What kind of optimism can you offer, Zhala? Because Vladimir Kara-Murza's release was a big surprise to you. You didn't expect it to end well for him. What can you offer her in terms of optimism?
Well, I mean, I've had two big cases of people close to me incarcerated in Russia. There was Sergei Magnitsky, who was killed, and Vladimir Kara-Murza, who we saved. And I'm hoping that Zhala's story would be the one of saving, not having her father die. And she's doing a very good job. She succeeded in getting her father into house arrest. He desperately needs medical attention. We're going to do everything we can to help her and her family raise the profile of her dad so that hopefully he can be released. And I have to believe that Azerbaijan is not a monolith like Russia. It's a small country. They depend on a lot of different relationships. And the key is raising the profile of her father's case, raising the awareness of her father's case so that governments can tell the Azeri regime that, let this guy out because it's not going to do you any good. And, hopefully this is what happens. But, it's a scary time for the family. I mean, and any time a family is in one of these positions where they have someone they love who's behind bars and dying, they can't rest for a single second. There's not a single moment that, from the beginning of the day until she goes to sleep, there's not a moment of rest. And even when she's sleeping, she's dreaming about, all the terrible things that could happen, that are happening, all her struggles. And there's just nothing worse than being in this position and thinking, what else can I do? What more can I do? How can I help my father? How can I help the person I love get out of prison? And so we should all try to help Zhala with this struggle.
Zhala, anything else you want to say?
I think it's important to understand that, as Bill Browder said, is that these dictators are extremely reunited, and their only desire not only to actually repress their own people, but also to actually expand. And what we mean by expansion is that expand to Europe, expand to UK, and to invade as much as country as possible. You know, today it's Ukraine. Who knows who's going to be next tomorrow? Because it started with Crimea, and now Putin wants to invade whole Ukraine, and they are going to continue. They are now basically in control of Georgian government, which has been previously very progressive when I was trying to be part of European Union as well. So what I'm trying to say is that I think his investigation is valuable because it's to protect whole Europe and to make sure that people in UK, people are in Western countries are in a safe and secure place. And this is the most important thing for everybody. We don't want dictators to go around and repress their own people, invade countries around it, and then corrupt politicians in different Western countries. That's not what we want, and we shouldn't want it. We should really protect the values of UK and Europe, and look at my dad's fight and fight with him together against this dictator so that we can have safety and security in the region.
Thank you very much for spending time with us, and congratulations on your award. I really hope that you have some good news on your father soon.
Yes, thank you a lot.
Zhala Bayramova and Bill Browder, great to have you on Frontline. And she'll be getting her award on Thursday, the 14th. You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.